What's going on, everybody? It's RoyYG here, coming at you with a brand new video. And if you've been keeping up with my Twitter at all, which you definitely should if you don't already, by the way, it's where you'll find constant channels and updates and news, then you'll know that I just recently tried out a brand new deck at my competitive locals. What is that deck, you may ask, if you're not currently looking at the screen or, saw the title or the thumbnail or anything about the video? Well, that is Dinomorphia. And so, why Dinomorphia? I decided I did want to get back into the control scene in terms of the game because I've been playing a lot of combo decks or mid-range decks lately, and I thought control would be a better way to make myself a better player overall because you gotta require a lot of skillful interactions and everything like that, a lot of critical thinking. And Dinomorphia is a deck that I've been labbing for quite a while since, a little bit after release. I think it was right when Rexsturm was revealed in the OCG, but I never really committed to it physically, except for a good chunk of the cards. Because I decided, I don't really want to spend all the money that Rexsturm and Frenzy and that would cost, because it did cost a while on release, but I had all the original stuff from the Battle of Chaos core, so I had it ready overall. I just didn't really have it completely finished with all the Difo support, but I decided to play it because I did see that there was a second place Tulsa regional list, which you'll notice this has a good few similarities to it in terms of ratios of certain cards, because I was like, fuck it, I already have it all, why not actually give it a shot in a competitive scene? And wow, this deck absolutely killed it. I managed to take, in terms of points, we didn't actually play out top 4, we split like we usually do. In terms of points, I got second place. I went X1 in a 4-rounder, which doesn't seem like too many, but keep in mind these were a lot of really good matchups, except for my last one, which we won't really talk about very much. I do have all of my matchups up on Twitter if you do want to go see them in a little bit more of a breakdown. But I did play against Tenyi Swordsoul, which is arguably the worst matchup for this deck to go against. Salamangrape, which was a really good back and forth grind game. We went into game 3. And then my best game was Dragon Link, which was absolutely insane. It was full power adventure Dragon Link with all sorts of stuff like that. We had so much back and forth and interaction. We went into game 3, and the only thing that won him the game was his luck on his targets for standby phase Twin Twisters, because I flipped anti-spell and he chained Twin Twisters and he targeted anti-spell and the domain, which I needed to last until the main phase, and then he proceeded to Harpies. So if I would have kept the domain, I probably would have been able to actually kill it. I don't know. But it's in the past now. I still ended up taking second because, my last opponent was pretty bad. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and get into the actual deck profile. As always, I will have it up on the side of the screen over here in terms of ratios and everything for you busy duelists. Though I do recommend watching the entire video instead of just looking if you want an actual breakdown. So, starting off with the Dinomorphia monsters. Of course, we start off with 3 Dinomorphia Theritzia and 3 Dinomorphia Diplos, the only 2 monsters, and you do need to maximize on all your copies. TLDR, you want to open her, and if you don't open her, you're probably in trouble. You don't want to open him, and if you do open him, you're probably in trouble. Basically, Theritzia is your main powerhouse. She's going to be carrying the entire deck on her back, being able to set any of your traps, particularly your fusion traps. And Diplos is actually not a bad card to have on board. It is really nice to summon off of Alert. Getting the 500 burn off of the effect is really nice for closing out games, because if you have 2 Kentroginas, they're never going to be able to do game on their own without skill drain or something. And so getting that little extra 500 burn is actually pretty relevant. But if you open only Diplos and maybe some trap cards, there's going to be a really big issue, because that means that you're just going to have to use Diplos to dump Theritzia and pray it gets destroyed, and you don't, because that's the only way you're getting into your Theritzia and your fusion traps. I do wish they had another main deck monster. I think they'd really benefit from one, especially one that could pop a Dinomorphia to special itself or recycle your banished traps. But otherwise, it's fine overall. It's just really annoying that you need to keep them in deck as much as possible, because you will burn out of resources really fast in terms of the monsters. That's completely it for the main deck monsters. We do have a few hand traps, only 6 of them total. We have 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring and 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. Really standard here, honestly. Ash is just a really nice, good card. And then Imperm is one of your better going second tools, but you can also use it going first, and it synergizes by being a trap, so you can banish it from grave for your level 4s. The deck does struggle to go second, so it's not like you can't play any hand traps, but I don't think you want to play too many, because if you do go first, you'd rather see, your actual good traps. And so I don't think there's anything more needed than this. Maybe if Lancia was a good main deck card, you could, drop an Ash, drop an Imperm, play a Lancia, and play 2/2/2. But I think overall, having 6 hand traps is a really nice ratio. Onto the spells. We actually play a lot more spells than I used to. we have 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance, and 2 copies of Pot of Duality, and yeah, I'm poor. Please use Prosperities if you have Prosperities and plan on following this list. Prosperity is so good, and I've banished triple Rexstorm or triple Kentrigina, like, I think twice each throughout the entire tournament. I might not have even been able to win that Dragon Link matchup in Game 3 because I banished all my Rexstorms, and he's just, like, the actual big boss monster. And if you banish all 3 Kentriginas, then at that point, you kind of just lose. But yeah, so I play the 3 extra. The extra draw is kind of nice because, you know, you do get more purple cards in your hand and things like that. But not knowing what you're going to be getting, and also the not being able to choose what you're banishing, is just absolutely agonizing. And then Pot of Duality, I wasn't set on Duality, but it came in so much clutch so many times. Opening both of these, right, you bait out with the Extrav, and then you Duality after they Ash, and so you get to choose what you want instead of actually having to rely on the RNG of drawing. I think the highlight of using Duality was in Game 2 against Tenyi Sorcel. I actually managed to 2-0, which is really shocking. It only probably helped that he wasn't too great of a player because he was just getting back into the game. I literally Extraved into Lancia, which came up later, and then I proceeded to Pot of Duality into Evenly Matched Game 2, and it completely destroyed his board. He had like Chao Feng, Chi Xiao, Set Blackout, and then D-Barrier, which was absolutely insane to see it like get completely blown out by Evenly Matched. So Duality was really helpful there, and I think I'm going to definitely keep playing this card in the main because I wasn't set on it because you do sometimes Domain or Alert on your turn, but it doesn't come up enough with Duality also being in hand. It's more of like a going first card, you know? And then we have 2 more spells. We have 1 copy of Fossil Dig and 1 copy of Called by the Grave. Saki 1 of Fossil Dig, that's definitely something from the Tulsa regional list. It actually came in pretty clutch, honestly. Being able to top deck Fossil Dig was really nice, but I don't want to play too many because you would rather see purple cards in your hand and you'd rather keep most of your Dinomorphies in the deck. So this is just like a 4th copy of Theritzia, basically. It's like playing 3 Fractal and 1 Tanky, honestly. And then we have the 1 Called by the Grave because Ash Blossom is an absolute monster against this deck, and you want your fusion traps to resolve. If they don't resolve, you're in for a very bad time. But that is it for the spells. Now time for the majority of the deck, the trap cards. So starting off with the Dinomorphia cards, of course, we have 3 copies of Dinomorphia Frenzy and 3 copies of Dinomorphia Domain. This was really, really good. I opened or drew at least one of these every opening hand. Let me just adjust this. I'm sorry. That's like at a weird angle right now, my camera is. I opened at least one of these every game, and if you open 2 of them, like one of each, your opponent basically can't play. Because, if you open both, you're guaranteed access to your Rexstorm anyway. And if they don't have Ash, then you can actually get all 3 fusions if you choose to use all of the resources in your deck. Not too great of an idea unless you open, like, multiple strikes or something. But overall, this was just so absolutely, like, crazy. These cards just carry so much, being able to access your fusions. Both of these are technically Rexstorms. Just this one is the less preferred one because you won't have both on board. You'll have to use your Kentrigina for it. The threat of Frenzy getting out Rexstorm was just so great that my opponent's impermed Kentrigina just so much, and some of them were even actually stupid enough to Ogre, which was hilarious given the fact that, you know, it's almost like they float when they're destroyed. So yeah, you definitely need to max out on these because without them, your deck is in a really bad spot if you don't see a fusion monster. But the fusion monsters are just so good overall. For the rest of the Dinomorphia traps, we play a similar ratio to the Tulsa regional list. We have 2 copies of Dinomorphia Sonic, 1 copy of Dinomorphia Brute, and 1 copy of Dinomorphia Alert. These are the only ones that you need. You're not playing like the really weird combo Dino variant that uses Theritzia, so you don't need Shell. I don't know why they play Shell, to be honest. Don't really need 2 copies of each of these. I actually did play that in my replay list, which you definitely can still see on the channel. And I was playing that ratio, and before I saw the deck profile that I labbed a little bit, and I was playing 2 of all of these back in my original profile when I was playing them physically. But I can definitely see why having 1 is preferred, because 2 Sonic definitely comes up, by the way. One of them I'm actually dumping off of Diplos a lot, while the other I set off of Theritzia. But these are just so, sacky. I don't know. Because Alert, this card's absolutely insane. This card completely carried my local experience, because being able to revive your Kentroginas or your Rexterms or even just your 2 level 4s to be able to float into more of them was so clutch, especially on my turn when I needed to, like, get more board presence up for the next turn. It also saved me from dying a lot of times because remember, your life points are going to be super low. A fucking, like, Karibo could kill you half the time. So Alert definitely put in work there. Brute, I actually think I only used, like, maybe once, twice even. Like, I thought it'd come up a lot more because, you know, it's a free pop that also makes your things float. But more often than not, the only Dinomorphias you're going to be having left on the board are your fusions. Because if you normal summon your Theritzia or Diplos, you're usually going to be fusing them off with Domain when they're on the field. So you don't really want to pop your fusions, except for maybe Kentrogina, or, like, you know, you can pop Rexterm if you have an alert, I guess, to immediately summon it back. But Brute just barely came up and was more of like a, you know, hey, I have no other trap cards in hand. This is a really good disruption because I didn't draw too well. I was very happy with these ratios overall. Like, I wish I could play more Alert without seeing it too often because I like setting it off of Theritzia or opening it when I have full stuff. But the problem is that this card is not only dead without Dinomorphias, but it doesn't do anything on its own to disrupt the opponent like Brute does, because both of these also require Dinomorphia on board, but they don't actually provide disruption. This requires them not only, like, engrave, which is harder to get than on board, but also, you know, you don't really do anything to your opponent like that way, unless you're summoning back a Rexterm. Yeah, so I'm very happy with the ratios overall. I do wish Alert was a bit more easy to run at multiple copies, but, you know, you win some, you lose some. But anyways, on to the non-Dinomorphia trap cards. We have 2 copies of Ferret Flames. Let me just adjust that. And 2 copies of Ice Dragon's Prisons for the normal traps. So this is definitely a difference from the Tulsa Regional list, is the Ice Dragon's Prison, because he actually didn't play any of this card at all, and that is something I actually completely disagree with, because I think that Ice Dragons is such a powerful card. Keep in mind that this deck has really bad going second potential, and so it's such a good disruption when your opponent is on turn 3, because they don't usually see it coming, and as they're climbing up into something like their archetypal boss monster or maybe access code, you can always IDP to prevent it from happening or hit the boss monster when it hits the field. My Salamangreat opponent even admit that the Ice Dragon's Prison completely threw him off, and he had no idea that he'd run into something like that, and it really put in a lot of work against him in particular. But it's also just good going first in general, because, you know, it's basically a double disruption, right? You're not only DD crowing something out of the grave, but you're also banishing something from field, so you're really getting rid of a lot of their advantage that they have. And push comes to shove, you can take the monster. There is no restriction on the monster being able to attack. Its effects are just negated. You can still attack with it, which is really strong. And then, of course, Ferret Flames. How can we forget about Ferret Flames? This card put in a lot of work as well. Being able to force your opponent to shuffle back all of their things is so strong. Funnily enough, it didn't actually break too many boards, except for, I think, one against the Dragon Link player, in terms of, you know, shuffling back an entire board. It was mainly just, like, 1 or 2 problematic monsters so that I didn't die, or that I had less to deal with in terms of negations. So yeah, both of these cards are really nice, technically blowout cards. Being able to just remove board presence for basically free is really nice. So as I mentioned, Tenyi Sword Soul is a really bad matchup for the deck, mainly because of things like Tenyi Spirit Vashuda being able to activate Engrave or Hand to bounce your Rexterm, which is, like, obviously your win condition. And so we are remaining 2 copies of Gozen Match. Gozen Match is not only really good against the Tenyi Sword Soul matchup though, but also just a really good card in general because all of your monsters are dark. Everything that you summon that is a Dinomorphia is dark. You'd also play Rivalry if you really felt like it, because there are all dinosaurs as well. You know, Rivalry just isn't as good of a card, to be fair. At least this format, sorry. But Gozen put in a lot of work. Not only did it break up the Tenyi Sword Soul player's board going second, but it also did the same thing to the Dragon Link player, and then proceeds to hinder them from actually going into anything else afterwards. The only thing that helped the Dragon Link player play through this was Draco back, of course, because obviously under Gozen, I believe it's the same rules as Evenly Match where you have to keep the token, but you know, at least being able to use Draco back, being able to bounce this is the main thing that prevented him from completely getting obliterated by it. This card puts in a lot of work, and I'm glad it's like the only, you know, monkey flip Floodgate that we play. Yeah, Gozen Match, really good card, going first or going second. Being able to break a board, especially if you bait out the Omni Negates, is just so absolutely strong. And then finally, all we have left is the Solemn Brigade. We have 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. Obviously, this synergizes with the deck. It pays half. It's an Omni Negate. It's a counter trap. You know, what more could you want? But then we also have 2 copies of Solemn Strike. So, just like how I was, you may be a bit weirded out by this, because, you know, most of the time you're going to be under, like, 1,500 life points. You know, how are you even activating this? Well, Solemn Strike is not only, you know, good under Stealth Bergia, which prevents you from paying life points, right? But it's also really good going first, because, again, Ashe is just so strong against this deck. Because if they hit the counter trap, you are absolutely done for. And so basically, the 2 strikes act as a second and third called by almost. Even without that, it is still a very good disruption, because you can at least activate 2 of your Dinomorphia cards, or, you know, just activate Frenzy, summon Kentrigina effect, summon your Rexsturm. You'll still have enough to activate Strike there, as long as you're not having your life points anymore after that until you activate the Strike. And so it's really not a bad card as long as you open it and don't draw it late game, but that goes for a lot of the cards in this deck, to be completely fair. So yeah, Strike is mainly there as an Ashe killer, but it is still a really good card overall. It's good going second as well, because, you know, obviously they're going to be trying to, you know, use their monster effects on turn 2 to climb up and kill you. But if you stop that, especially by getting rid of their board presence or hand presence using the Strike, then it's going to be really hard for them to continue to kill you. And that is it for the main deck. We are playing 40 cards exactly. I'm really happy with how the main deck actually turned out in terms of ratios. So let's go ahead and get on to the extra deck. So obviously, Extrav or Prosperity, you are going to be playing 3 copies of every Dinomorphia. So that means 3 copies of a Dinomorphia Rexsturm, 3 copies of Dinomorphia Kentrigina, and 3 copies of Dinomorphia Stealth Bergia. So again, pretty self-explanatory due to Extra, but even if you're playing Prosperity, you play 3, because you do go into just about all of these. In order of importance, it's probably 1, 2, 3, but these are interchangeable, because honestly, I'd rather lose the Rexsturm than the Kentrigina, because it's a lot harder to access the Rexsturm without Kentrigina, because that means you basically have to get 2 of the fusion traps in your hand. You need like a Frenzy and a Domain, because you'll have to Domain, you'll have to Frenzy into the Stealth Bergia, and you'll have to Domain into the Rexsturm using that Stealth Bergia. Kentrigina, though, not only allows you to access your other fusions a lot easier, but also allows you to copy any of your normal traps for Dinomorphia, so you can copy a Brute and Alert and get an extra use out of it. So obviously, Rexsturm, being the absolutely insane Floodgate that he is, completely carried the deck. You know, people really don't still understand what he does. Or actually, funnily enough, more people know what he does than all the other cards, which I think is just really amusing. But he in particular just absolutely destroys everything. Locking down your opponent's entire field in terms of monsters is just way too strong not to use. And I would argue it's the only thing that's making Dinomorphia competitively relevant right now in the slightest. A lot of people think it's really funny because they try to punch the Rexsturm, right? But they don't understand that Rexsturm has an attack modulation effect. And so, like the Tenyi Sword Soul player, for example, he made Cheng Ying, right? And he was preparing to go and attack Rexsturm, but then he reread him, and he had to immediately pass turn because he realized, so yes, while Cheng Ying's effect to gain attack does not activate and lower attack does not activate, it doesn't matter because Cheng Ying's attack is just going to be lowered to, like, I think the lowest I got was 75 throughout the entire tournament, and it was that game, which was really, really funny. So yeah, it's really hard to actually out the Rexsturm unless your deck has hand and grave effects, or if, you know, they like droplet it or, you know, try to destroy it. But if they destroy it, then he floats into something like your Kentrigina or one of your level 4s, which will get you basically another one next turn guaranteed. So basically, your best way to out it is to bounce it with something like Vishuda or to banish it somehow. Again, about Kentrigina being able to copy all of your things is just really good. Without it, the deck would probably still die, honestly, because she's just such a clutch card. You're always going to be going into her first with Frenzy and then Rexsturm, unless you fear something like, I don't know, unless you fear something random that might stop the Kentrigina. And then, of course, Stealth Bergia, he's mostly Frenzy fodder, but he does still come up. I summoned him, I think, maybe twice. Once was in a game that actually ended, like, I think right before I was saying, yeah, I can make Stealth Bergia. But another time was when I had to hard make the Rexsturm because I banished all 3 of my Kentriginas off of Extra, which sucked. But overall, Stealth Bergia is like your only saving grace in the Despia matchup, because unless you're getting super polyed, of course. But Stealth Bergia does counter Masquerade. With the way it's worded, it says you do not pay life points to activate Dinomorphia effects or trap cards, and so that will stop Masquerade from making you pay. So it is very important to get this out in the Despia matchup, and because they don't play too many hand traps, which is really good, then it's actually easier to get either all 3 fusions out, or if you open like Domain Domain Frenzy, you can actually sit on Rexterm Stealth Bergia, which is also pretty good. Though to be fair, most Despia players aren't even summoning Masquerade anymore, let's be real. But yeah, obviously 3-3-3 ratio because of the pot, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Now, time for the non-Dinomorphias. We have a few Xyz monsters. We have 1 Dolka, 1 Logia. Dolka came up in the Tenyi Sword Soul matchup to stop Sthana and Grave, and it also stopped him from opening a Tenyi and then using the effect to get one of his 2 Vishuddhas live. But other than that, neither of these came up. Tornado Dragon didn't come up at all. Never really needed to pop another back row, and if I did, I could probably use something like Brute. That's it for the Xyz, and then we have a few Link monsters. 1 Dark can come up, but didn't. 1 Unicorn, and that's just for climbing into access code, or if you for some reason can't pop something or beat over it to out it. Yeah, none of the Link monsters came up at all. At least Dolka came up for the Xyz, but these mainly were just banish fodder overall. And that's going to do it for the extra deck, and with that out of the way, that is going to do it for the deck profile already. That seemed like it went by pretty fast. So yeah, I had a really good time playing Dinomorphia at my competitive locals. I really hope I can keep playing the deck because I did have a lot of really fun interactions and grind potential with the deck. And I think it's a very skillful deck, especially in terms of life point management, because you not only have to try and disrupt your opponent, you have to try and not die. Like a lot of your hands, if it's like Diplos or whatever, then you're going to like dump something like a Sonic, just in case, so you don't actually lose all of your life points and get completely murdered. So overall, what do I think about Dinomorphia in terms of power level? So I've usually been putting it in tier 2 on my tier list, but in the last one I did put it at Rogue. But I do think it can actually bump back up to tier 2. I think it's a really good like sleeper sort of deck that people aren't really expecting. And so we'll be able to snag wins here and there, especially with how powerful of a card something like Rexterm is. And considering my results in the local tournament, I do believe that it can see a lot of success in the competitive scene against competitive or semi-competitive decks. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think about the deck in the comments below, because that is going to do it for the video. If you liked it, please sure to leave a like, as it helps put this video and the channel into YouTube recommended. And if you really liked it and you want to see more content like this, like more deck profiles, but this deck is actually going to be showcased in 2 replays from that locals against Tenyi Sword Soul and Salamangreat up on the channel here soon, then perhaps consider subscribing, because we're on our way to 1,500 subscribers, and it's the best way to support the channel. Plus, it's absolutely free. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.